Howdy, Immortalium here, and today I want to have a discussion on discovering manga, as in how do people discover the manga that they eventually come to like and love? And this is a question that I've been pondering for quite a long time. One of the earliest examples I can remember that kind of made me begin thinking about this was when I read an article from Anime News Network. It was from their House of a Thousand manga series, and it discussed when the writer for that article met Akira Toriyama at a convention. And he spoke about how he loved Dragon Ball, that he thought it was amazing. And Akira Toriyama apparently perked up and asked, "Have you read Dr. Slump?" Now, for those of you who are unaware of Dr. Slump is a manga series that Akira Toriyama did before Dragon Ball. And when the writer of the article mentioned that he hadn't read Dr. Slump, apparently Akira Toriyama was quite disappointed. And from reading that article, it really made me think about how people come to discover manga. For instance, Dragon Ball, I don't have any of the Dragon Ball manga myself, but I do have the first TV series in its entirety. Dragon Ball is one of the most popular manga series in the world, definitely one of the best selling. However, it actually surprises me how few people have actually heard of Dr. Slump, despite the fact that it came from Akira Toriyama himself, the creator of Dragon Ball. And because of that, it made me think about whether people who read manga, do they tend to follow the authors of manga? Now, I do know that there's plenty of people that I've met online who do follow particular authors, but I do wonder in the manga reading general population, do they care about if an author has created something that they've liked before, or whether it's other factors that they're more interested in? And so when I began to look into how manga is marketed, I started to realize how lackluster a lot of manga marketing can be. Now, I do follow several manga publishers on social media, and on these platforms, they do put a lot of effort in promoting their manga series and making sure that people are aware that these things are coming out. However, that does require that you go and follow them on these social media. Outside of social media, the only other marketing that I can think of from them is advertisements in the banner of anime and manga related websites, such as, for instance, Anime News Network, and the advertisements at the back of manga volumes. Beyond that, I can't think of any other marketing that they do. And while it's entirely possible that I've missed some level of marketing that they do, and if you are aware of that, if you are aware of some other form of marketing that these manga publishers do besides those I've just mentioned, then I would love to hear them in the comments below. But as far as I'm aware, they're very limited compared to other media such as television, such as film, and even anime. I think anime is a lot better marketed than manga. So I do find that quite strange. Now, of course, one of the best advertisements that a manga series can get is anime. If an anime adaptation comes out of a manga series, and we've seen this time and time again, of anime being released in the West and suddenly driving up sales of the manga series associated with it. We've seen it with Naruto, we've seen it with Attack on Titan. It's just a case that when an anime adaptation comes out, that it suddenly gets a lot more people interested in the manga. And I personally think that's because anime is much better marketed. And so by marketing the anime, they're also promoting the original manga. Now, that isn't exclusive to the West. Even in Japan itself, a lot of anime series are made to promote the original manga, light novel, video games, etc., whatever it's based off of. A big part of creating anime is to promote these original source materials. But I do think it's a shame that it seems that anime is better marketed than manga, since I think that manga is just as good as anime, and I think it should be marketed to the same standards as anime. Beyond that, I think that a lot of the ways that people figure out what manga series that they're interested in actually comes from word of mouth, whether that be through stuff like YouTube. I and many others have recommended tons and tons of manga series to people, and it turns out that a lot of people do actually follow that advice and pick up those series. And then, of course, there's the case of being told by a real-life friend, hey, this manga series is good or interesting. I've come across plenty of people who've become interested in a manga series because of the fact that their friends outside of the internet, I should say, are reading a manga series and they're interested in partaking and being able to discuss that series with them. And then, of course, there is coming across manga series. Now, when I think of coming across manga series, I tend to think of, going into a bookshop and seeing that a manga series there and you're like, oh, that cover looks interesting, or you read the blurb and you're like, oh, this sounds really interesting, or you open it up and the art looks good to you and you're like, oh, this seems interesting. Of course, something similar to that can happen, say, on Amazon, where you can preview a manga series. But for some reason, I just think more of the physical examination of manga more than seeing it through the internet when it comes to that kind of stuff. So I do think that that is a factor. I've definitely heard, what is it, Barnes and Nobles? That's a big popular bookstore chain, and I've definitely heard of a lot of people discovering manga series just seeing it there on the shelf in those stores. I myself actually used to go to a store called Other Realms, and before I realized that you could buy manga for a lot cheaper online, I remember I'd peruse the store there and find series that I thought was quite interesting to myself. So that is an interesting way to discover manga, but I do think it is becoming more and more limited as time goes on. Interestingly, and I think this is an absolutely fascinating way to discover manga, and I don't really hear of people ever mentioning this, but it's coming across manga series within manga, or anime series, or whatever. And one of the best examples I can think of when it comes to this is the series Azumanga Daioh. And within Azumanga Daioh, there's a joke where one of the girls mentions that her role model is Fujiko Mine. Now, Fujiko Mine is from the Lupin III franchise. And at the time that I read Azumanga Daioh, I had not seen any Lupin, I hadn't read any Lupin, I didn't know who Fujiko Mine was. And by going to the translation notes in that book, I was able to find out, yes, this is a character from Lupin III. But I remember the way that that joke was delivered. And one of the things that really stood out to me when I read that was the expectation, the fact that it really felt to me that the author expected you to just automatically know who Fujiko Mine was. But that makes a lot of sense to me now, knowing how popular Lupin III is in Japan. But I ended up becoming a massive fan of the Lupin III franchise. But while I do admit that I've predominantly watched anime incarnations of it, that's because the anime incarnations are the most accessible. If the manga came out, of course I'd want to pick it up, because I'm just such a big fan of the franchise now. Another very interesting example that I can remember is when I read With the Light, Raising an Autistic Child, which, by the way, my favorite manga of all time. And the main character in it, Sachiko Azuma, she mentioned the fact at one point in the manga that her favorite manga of all time was a series called Tomorrow's Joe. At the time, I did not know Tomorrow's Joe at all. And I remember when I looked it up, when I began to research what Tomorrow's Joe is, I realized that it was considered to be one of the greatest manga of all time, that the anime incarnation of it is similarly considered to be one of the greatest anime of all time, that has had an enormous impact on both the mediums of manga and anime. And don't even get me started on Rose of Versailles. I've seen Rose of Versailles mentioned in so many manga series as one of the greatest manga of all time, that I'm super interested in picking it up. But discovering manga through other manga, or possibly anime series, is something that I don't really ever hear people discussing at all. And so I'd absolutely love, like, if you've discovered an anime series or a manga series or anything through reading a manga or watching an anime, I'd love to hear it, because I think that's an absolutely fascinating way to discover a manga or anime. So ultimately, when it comes to discovering manga, personally, I should say that the way I tend to discover manga series is through social media and through YouTube, watching other YouTubers unbox series, discuss their opinions on them, do reviews, etc, and that's how I discover manga series predominantly. But I'd love to hear how you yourself discover manga series. If you can think of more ways that people can discover manga. If there are other forms of advertising that these manga companies do, other than social media or at the back of other manga series, or through banners on certain websites devoted to anime and manga, that I'm unaware of, please mention them, because I'd absolutely love to know more about this topic. However, I do believe genuinely that a lot of these manga companies can do a better job when it comes to marketing their series. And I do hope in the future that we see them find even more creative ways to make people discover unusual manga series, or even to just get more people in the general population reading manga, interested in manga, etc. So those were my thoughts on discovering manga. Let me know how you discover manga. Let me know if you have come across any of those instances I've mentioned where you're reading a manga and they mention a manga series and you're like, oh, that's very interesting, or something similar. Any other way that manga publishers market manga, and of course any additional information that you might have on this particular topic. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to comment, rate, subscribe, and bye-bye.